Hello and welcome to our webcast today on CMO perspectives on the long-term impact of COVID-19. I'm Denise Dahlhoff, a senior researcher at the Conference Board with a focus on consumer and marketing topics. And we are excited to have three marketing and communications experts join us for today's discussions. Let me briefly introduce our speakers to you. Let me start with Craig Carroll. Craig leads our Communications Institute at the Conference Board. He's also the Executive Director of the Observatory on Corporate Reputation. He has an academic background that he has been applying to his collaboration with all kinds of companies. He has published key works of reference on corporate reputation, and he has been teaching around the world, in fact, in graduate programs on topics such as corporate communications, reputation, and social responsibility. Welcome, Craig, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Then we have Mary Lee Sachs. Thanks. We have Mary Lee Sachs. Mary Lee is the Program Director for the Conference Board's Council for Chief Marketing Officers. She is the founder and CEO of Brand Pie Inc., a brand consultancy. She has decades of international experience in integrated marketing and communications, including in the creative agency industry and in brand consulting. She has advised a variety of blue chip companies in consumer-facing industries and beyond. And among her various contributions to the marketing professions are two books that she has written about CMOs, and she's also a regular contributor to Forbes CMO Network. Thanks for joining us, Mary Lee, and welcome. And then last but not least, we have Stacy Simpson, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Genpact, a B2B company providing digital solutions for a range of business functions. We are also thrilled for her to be a member of the Conference Board's Council for Chief Marketing Officers. And prior to joining Genpact, Stacy was the Global Head of Marketing and Communications for Publicis Sapient. And before that, she was Senior Vice President of Global Communications and Brand Marketing for IAC, a leading multimedia company. And she has also held senior positions at IBM and in public relations, media relations, and strategic communications in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us as well, Stacy, and welcome. So before we start our discussion, some housekeeping items. You can get CPE credits for attending the session. Just follow the prompts on the screen throughout the webcast. We will have two poll questions for the audience that we would love your engagement for. So you'll see them pop up, as we talk. We also encourage audience questions. So whenever, something pops to mind, if you want to ask the speakers, feel free to add your comments or questions into the chat box on your screen. And we would also appreciate your feedback on this webcast at the end. So we would love for you to stay on until the end and share your feedback. All right, let me introduce the topics we'll be covering today. They're actually based on recent research that we have been doing at the Conference Board, where we surveyed C-suite executives across the world. And today we are reviewing the perspectives of the CMOs. And there are essentially two buckets of topics we'll be covering. One is management and organization topics, and they include flatter organizations and decentralized decision-making. Also, a really hot topic during COVID-19 has been remote and flexible working. And so what do CMOs think about that, and what do they envision for the future? Then the big topic of creative collaboration. And last but not least, on management and organization, transparent communications. We have seen, tons of organizations internally and externally. And, what does that mean for transparency of communications for going forward? And the second bucket of topics are customer relationships topics, specifically sustainability and corporate purpose. Then another big topic that has been talked about is, digital transformation and how we have become way more digitalized. And what do CMOs think about that? Specifically, we'll be focusing on more self-service options for customers. And then lastly, we'll talk about consumer sensitivity about data privacy and how that might have changed during this crisis and what that means for going forward. So actually, before launching into the discussion, let me ask our speakers if you could point out one thing or one development throughout this COVID-19 crisis that has been positive for marketing communications, what would that be? Stacey, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for joining. So I do think, when I look at the last, 9+ months, there's frankly so many lessons and so much has changed for so many of us. I'm sure we'd all agree on that. But if I had to boil it down to, one set of lessons, I would say that in this time frame, we as marketers and as communicators, I think we listened so much more intently to all of our key audiences, to our clients, to our internal stakeholders. And we turned that listening into speed to action. And so in every part of what we did, we looked and said, how do we listen harder? How do we listen more deliberately for the signals on where our clients are at this exact moment, and what do they need from us at that moment to be successful? Because as we know, cycle times collapse so dramatically that what our people or our clients needed in one day might look very, very different in the next.
Well, so really like great focus on customer centricity, on really having your ears to the ground.
Absolutely.
Mary Lee, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have been heartened by the amount of inventiveness that has gone into how companies and brands have pivoted very quickly to be offering either new solutions, new offers, or extensions of what they already offer in a way that I've never seen happen before, so quickly, moving so quickly to market. And if I were to kind of point out a couple of examples by what I mean, for example, Airbnb, who had already in its stable of offerings some experiences that were really interesting, they were able to take that online so that people who could no longer travel were able to do other things but still get that kind of experience. And I think GoDaddy's Open New Stand program for small business owners was also a great example of that. So brands just really moving so quickly to deliver something that was going to be of value, of use, whether that be entertainment value or that just be true enrichment for the individual, I think is fantastic.
Great examples, and thanks for sharing. In fact, like a physical company like Airbnb, ironically, they are so inventive to, move that online, at least part of or a flavor of that experience. And Craig, what are your thoughts on any positive developments that have come out of
Sure.
this crisis so
Just
far?
tapping into the ideas that have just been shared so far, I would say also the change in belief that this signifies, right? That companies are able to change and move this quickly and take action, right? So when you see so many companies that are being challenged right now with the resources, when you don't have resources, you have to be resourceful, and that's what we're seeing. So a lot of companies are stepping up. They're upgrading their belief system and taking action. They're listening faster, and they are delivering on that, right? And that's the big thing, is that they're able to deliver on things that they probably thought were not possible prior to this pandemic.
Sounds like real growth, that organizations really have developed a lot. Great. So before diving into some of the findings from our research, just some highlights, just some background on the research. So this is a project that we did across our company, to have multiple functions involved. Our sample includes 1,300 CEOs and C-suite executives globally. We conducted this survey in June of this year, and the intention was typically we do this survey with the C-suite once a year, but we added a mid-year survey because of the dynamic times and to tap executives' brains about what they see, how they see the future essentially, in terms of both the changes in their organizations, but also in society. And throughout this presentation, we'll use the CMO label as a short form for any roles that are related to marketing, customers, communication. So chief communications officers would be included in this, chief customer officers, and so forth. So our short label is CMOs. And we had about 120, exactly 117 CMO responses in our sample. Let's look at our first result. The first topic was decentralized decision making, and you see the results here for CEOs, CFOs, CMOs, and chief human capital executives. And you see here that for CMOs, for more CMOs, this is an outcome of COVID-19. So more decentralized decision making. And my question to you would be, is this finding consistent with your own attitudes or experiences to expect more decentralized decision making for going forward? Is this a learning resulting from this crisis? Who wants to chime in, Mary Lee?
Sure, I think absolutely. I think that kind of as an add-on to what I said earlier, the ability to move quickly, be more agile has become even more important than before. I mean, I saw a quote a couple of weeks ago, which I think kind of sums it up, that the new financial year is actually a quarter. So people have to move so much more quickly to act, to get things in market, to respond to customers. And I think a lot of the mechanisms for doing that, such as digital tools, apps, will be here to stay. I mean, I think that while we all miss the collaboration aspect of sitting in a room with our colleagues, we recognize that there have been some good things that have come out of COVID, and that means some new ways of working that make us more quick, more agile, and happy.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Denise. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Stacey.
I completely agree, and I do agree that certainly we have seen the flatter structure, and that it is, I think, this decentralized decision making is here to stay. I do think one of the things that requires is very strong alignment at every level of the organization to the common objective. Because what the great thing when you move decision making down as low into the organization and as distributed throughout the organization as possible, the good thing about that is that you can move with speed. You can accomplish so much more at scale. The potential consequence, though, is that efforts get diluted, right? Because the common objective gets lost. So I do think it's here to stay, and I think what it requires is very strong alignment to a common objective. And as any member of the C-suite, you are directly responsible for keeping that alignment to that objective. But I think as a CMO or chief communicator, you have a massive role to play in making sure that people are all rowing the boat in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good suggestion for, managing this, because it must be more complex now, to be decentralized, to have really a strong buy-in by everybody to the same mission and objectives. But the question I also wondered about is, with more people making decisions, is this also a tool to attract talent and to develop marketing talent? Like, any thoughts on that from your perspective?
I was waiting for Mary Lee or Stacy to chime in here. I think we're in such a different situation right now with everything COVID. I mean, we're expecting so many different types of changes, especially given the amount of downsizing and I guess turmoil that's going on. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see how much of a role that it's going to play, right? I think everyone, but we're seeing as many people that are sliding out of the position. New positions are being filled just as quickly. So we'll see if it's just happy to have a job, or if it's because they get more participation.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on like the talent, attraction or
I'd like
development?
to jump in.
Mary
I
Lee.
think that we've seen and we've heard all about millennials and Gen Z coming up the ranks, and I think that research tells us that they like to be empowered, that they want more empowerment, that they want to be more in charge of their destiny. And so I think that actually being able to give them more decision-making ability is going to be a positive. But I would reiterate what Stacy said. I think everybody does need to understand what the common goal is in order to ensure that there is some consistency in how an organization is coming across.
Right. Any last thoughts from you, Stacy, before we move on to the next topic?
Summed it up very well.
Great. Well, I already see our first poll question launched. The question is actually, compared, like, it has been a big topic, flexible work schedules, remote working, and so forth. The question is, compared to C-suite colleagues, does a greater, smaller, or about the same share of CMOs envision more flexible work schedules? Is it greater, about the same, or smaller? So, share your thoughts, and we'll discuss the findings. Essentially the question is, or maybe you can translate it that way: is marketing as progressive in all these, the new type of work, or is it more traditional in the sense that there might be a physical office and certain work hours when everybody's working together? So let's wait for some more responses to come in. Any thoughts by our speakers on what the audience might think about the marketing profession in this regard? Any guesses?
Oh, I don't want to give away I want to hear what everyone says. I'm like, we still have 60 more people on the call that I want to see jump in here.
So let's end the poll and see what our audience think.
Yep.
Can everybody see this now? So we have our audience, most of our audience think that there is a greater share of CMOs that envision more flexible work schedules. And another, about 36% expect about the same of CMOs. And we can take the poll down, we can actually look at the results. And so you may be surprised then to learn that in fact it's a smaller share of CMOs that are expecting more flexible work hours to come out of this. You can also see in the other results in the second line there, working remotely and telecommuting on a permanent basis, the share for CMOs is actually a little lower. And reducing office space, that also doesn't seem to be a great idea such a great idea to some CMOs. So, getting rid of a corporate office doesn't seem to be CMO's idea. However, on the other hand, they see training online, that could be an outcome, or they see that more than other colleagues in the C-suite. So, the question to the speakers would be, is this, in line with your own attitudes and your own experience? That, apparently, this flexible working maybe doesn't work as well for marketers and communicators?
Well, I'm happy to jump in on this one. I think that it is, I think there's a couple of different things here, right? So for marketers, where you tend to need to unlock creativity, the core of that question is how do you best unlock that creativity? And when and where do you need an in-person environment to do that versus where can that be done in other ways? Right, Mary Lee, you've already said we unlocked tools for creative collaboration and brainstorming and whiteboarding sessions that probably most of us didn't, or a lot of us didn't use, or certainly didn't use at the level we do now, 10 months ago. And so I think for us, we will, first of all, we're an incredibly global company, right? We've got over 100,000 people in 30 plus countries around the world. So we never, as a marketing organization, we were almost never, actually, I can say never, in the same place at the same time. But what we did have was pockets where people came together to make sure that they were collaborating and making sure that they were getting all of the creative inputs that they needed. So I think as we move forward, this will be about knowing where and when do you need to get people together in person versus we just did it that way because that's how we did it, because it was always done that way before. So to me, it's honing in on where and when you must be in person versus making sure that when you work in a distributed fashion, you are always getting as much of that creative input and as much of that collaboration as possible. As we get that second bucket right, or not right, get a better balance there, I think we'll see ourselves choosing maybe fewer places that we automatically think everybody must come together. But when we do, they will be optimized to make sure we're getting that creative collaboration and getting that input that we need that you simply can't do in a virtual environment.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like really more deliberate and differentiated, and even being more. When we used to all go to meetings in the same place, that's more now maybe a special thing to have this in-person, interaction.
Deliberate.
Any other thoughts on this?
Perfect way of putting it. If we're going to go all sit in a room and look at some slides that we could all just look at virtually, then that isn't going to be that good use of that in-person creative time. So being deliberate, I think, is exactly the right way to put it.
Yeah, I think it's shaken us up a bit. I mean, it used to be that we would have a workshop once a year, you'd have a planning meeting once a year, or you'd have a sort of session to collaborate about a particular campaign, and that was just what you did. Whereas now I think we are going to be thinking more carefully about how we bring people together. I was surprised by the results of the study, but then when you take into account how we need to be creative and we need to collaborate to get to that creativity, it makes sense. But equally, I was not surprised by the response to the poll that you just had. I think we all understand that we are going to need to be more flexible in how we create. And part of that is just really carefully thinking about the times that we do bring people together and being very purposeful about what we want to get out of those sessions. Yep. And more thoughtful about that. So I think that will actually create a better quality product at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. So you're also saying, there needs to be some flexibility, within, to Stacy's point, this differentiation, what needs to happen in person and, what can happen online.
Sure. We have,
Craig, any thoughts?
And we're discussing flexibility in a lot of different ways, tied to creativity and tied to innovation. But I do think, consistent with the findings here, we're probably not going to find the flexibility in the work hours. I mean, some of the conversations I've had is that the marketing and communication staff right now have been some of the most overworked at the organization. They're putting in more hours than the legal team, than the HR team, and they're taxed, and yet it's necessary right now, right? As companies are responding, thinking, and moving quickly, it might be that we have to use these technologies, whether it's in person or whether it's at home, to be creative. And we might come up with all kinds of solutions about how we collaborate and work together, but probably the one change that we won't find will be the number of hours.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So actually, you all have already touched on the topic of collaboration, which was also, we had some items in the survey that were about aspects of collaboration. And when you see here, really interesting, green means sort of the share within the CMO sample was higher than within the samples of the other C-suite functions. And so you see here, create agile project teams to redefine how work gets done, reconfigure our physical workspace to allow for social distancing, again, pointing to the fact that people will be in a physical office together, at least, for part of the time. And then also become more appreciative of the personal interactions that contribute to innovation and that get lost through remote work. And then also increasing external collaboration efforts, probably suggesting, innovation and growth and, thinking forward. Mary Lee, you recently talked about creative collaboration and you mentioned it earlier today. What is new about creative collaboration, since COVID started? What are the new
there's
aspects?
a lot more online tools that we can tap into now, and I think they probably existed before COVID. They're in the right space at the right time because everybody needs those sorts of tools now. And even when we go back to being physically present with each other, I think that there will be an increased role for those tools. And I'm talking about things like Zoom, like Miro, the whiteboarding tool. There's a lot of them out there. And I think that they will be present now. And there will be probably new things that come along as a result of that as well. And it's a great way of being able to do things in different ways. And we'll have a lot more tools at our disposal to use for collaboration. That said, I still the in-person collaboration, there's really no substitute for in-person collaboration, and there will need to be some of that, which is why I think the scores are so high on the previous slide that you showed. So it's going to be finding the right balance.
Actually, one question, because you earlier mentioned, really great examples of innovation, in this crisis. My question to you all would be, has innovation suffered during the crisis? Again, we had some examples. We probably can also think of, something that's new and that we have actually that we have liked in this crisis. But do you think overall innovation has suffered through this remote working?
So I can take a stab at that.
Yeah.
So from where I sit in the world, I don't think it has. Because I think that, what is the saying, necessity is the mother of invention. I think there is so much happening in the world right now. Pick any crisis you want. So a global health pandemic is one of them, but depending on where you sit in the world, you could have your pick of crises that are going on, right? And so I think all of these things happening together have created a level of innovation and desire to just get things done that, quite frankly, I actually haven't seen at this level in years, quite honestly. And I'd actually like to just pick on the last point in this on this slide right now, which is this external collaboration with non-traditional partners. So again, I'm in professional services, B2B environment. We have seen so many different types of firms, different types of companies coming together simply to do the right thing. So, even when I look at, the work that we have an extensive internal reskilling, upskilling, sort of continuous learning platform inside the company that we call Genome. It's how we regularly train and keep our 100,000 people sort of fresh on the latest set of skills and things going on. It's micro-learning. Well, in this environment, we said, let's take parts of that platform and simply open it up to the world. Just open it up because it's the right thing to do. If we have some expertise that other people can simply jump on board, leverage that expertise to make themselves, more competitive or give themselves better advantage in this environment, we just should. And so, Gadara, actually EdCast, sorry for that one, is a learning platform that we use for our internal. We said, hey, guys, can we just do this together? Are you willing? And they said, of course we're willing. Let's just put it up. Let's do it together. And we put that up together. We both said, we'll do it on our own respective dimes. Let's get this thing out there. And then we've opened it up to people and said, just if you think that this is of value, open it up to your people. Put your content on it if you want. That's just one tiny example, but we're seeing loads and loads of people just jumping in on efforts together simply to do the right thing for their client base, for their employee base, for the communities that they operate in. And I personally, I believe and hope that is absolutely here to stay.
That is so interesting that you're saying this, that this is happening actually out of the desire to do the right thing, because I was actually wondering about this external collaboration efforts, whether this is because, it's obviously an economic crisis that we are living through, But is this also to really think ahead about innovation and growth and doing something together? Because, companies have to watch their finances and they have to generate new revenues. Is that also part of that? I mean, this is a really good, that's another great insight that this is driven by, companies that they want to do the right thing. But is there also like a consideration of growth and innovation in this?
Everyone should be doing what they're best at versus trying to recreate the wheel where somebody else is actually better positioned to do that piece. Mary Lee, please add there too.
I think there's been some really interesting partnerships born out of the pandemic as well. I mean, I mentioned GoDaddy's small business efforts. They got 50 other companies to partner with them on that program. And they're all companies that do different things, but coming together, and that strength of having those 50 partners come together for small businesses was really powerful. And I think now we're seeing a lot more interesting partnerships joining up that we maybe wouldn't have seen before because people were trying to do their own thing. And, it's all about competition and being true to your customer base. But we're seeing a lot of interesting collaborations happen.
I'm going to tie this, this doing the right thing also to their very survival. I mean, this is not the moment when companies can be thinking about, making a profit or, or their commercial success, because it just participating, it's all about, or we're coming out of a moment of where it was all about survival. Any work that they did on innovation, collaboration, cross-sector partnerships was all about relevance and making sure that not just doing the right thing, but they were meeting their basic expectations, right? So what was required was a lot more than what has been required in the past. So I don't think you would see very many companies at this moment simply sitting back doing just enough, right, or doing things because it was going to just help the bottom line if it wasn't first serving society.
Actually, this is a great segue into an audience question we have by Marisol Angelini. And she asked, do you envision that companies continue to give free resources for all people to benefit from even after this crisis subsides? Because that also goes to addressing inequality, which has become much more visible in this crisis. Do you think this will continue just out of the goodness of companies' hearts?
I think that's interesting. I think on one hand, you see a lot of companies that have opened up their products and services to say, for 30 days, 60 days, or for a period of a quarter, that they're making certain products and services, either free or at a reduced fee. But I think there could probably be some type of pushback if at some point, right, they completely did a 180, right? I mean, we have to first make sure that we come through out of all of this okay. I'd be curious what Mary or Stacy think about this.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to give some thoughts there. I do think, the answer, to some extent, it will continue. I'm not sure it will continue solely out of the goodness of people's hearts. I actually think it will continue as long as our customer sets are, whether you're B2B or B2C, right? We all have stakeholders, and there are employees, there are clients, there are consumers. As long as our customer sets, our stakeholders demand that behavior, then I actually think behavior in that manner will continue. Not simply because we're all hopefully good people and trying to do the right thing, but also because our consumers are voting with their wallets on that they expect companies to stand up and do the right thing. So I think it's for both altruistic reasons and business reasons that to some extent those things will continue.
And the perfect world is obviously to find the common denominator, so it serves both goals. Right, let's dive into another topic then. Obviously, we have seen a lot of communication, both internally and externally, throughout the crisis. And one of our questions in the survey was about whether C-suite executives would see a world with more transparency in communication and in information sharing at all organizational levels. And we see here that the share of CMOs is a little smaller than with other C-suite functions. And so my question actually to you, Stacey, would be, how do you interpret these findings? Why, when transparency, again, we have, that's probably another topic we have heard a lot, that has increased. Why do CMOs seem to think so differently about this?
My view is that these numbers are more an evidence of the rest of the organization catching up to where the marketing and communications functions have already been and have been for quite some time. And so I don't think this is us being cynical. I think we've been here. We don't see it as an outcome of the pandemic, but we do see others feeling that way. And so I think our role and our opportunity is to make sure that we take this moment and keep everybody, coming along for the ride and continue that momentum as we progress into what will hopefully be a time of eventually fewer concurrent crises, happening to all of us.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So evidently, there is some, if marketing and communications is so far ahead, how can they bring their colleagues along? How do you, teach your colleagues, so to speak, or other functions? Any thoughts on that, on the practical, some practical tips on that? Mary Lee, maybe, or Craig?
I think a lot of it has to do with a bit of education, frankly. Being able to show your C-suite colleagues the good, the benefit of being more transparent is important. Maybe they're already seeing that, which is why you're seeing these figures in your study. But I think continually reminding them and showing them best practice is probably one of the ways of helping that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And actually, Stacey said, the CMO or marketing and communications function is so far along, but I would also imagine that especially in the US, the discussion around social justice, racial justice have been pushing the function even, to a new level. And so I'm just wondering, Craig, do you think that has still, yet enhanced the function's capabilities and level of transparency?
When you think about George Floyd's death being where it was, right, in the cycle of COVID-19, right? So there's already a moment where we're thinking about basic humanity here. And I do think that there's some things where we're already thinking about transparency and disclosure that were magnified because of his death and the speed by which organizations took action. And so I think that's one thing that we're going to see more companies do, right? They're going to use this as a moment to learn how to disclose, right, what they're doing. This is something that various stakeholder groups have been asking for a long time, and now they're being demanded to comment and to share what they're doing on race, what they're doing on their hiring practices, what they're doing on their equity practices, and to disclose that and to put metrics and milestones in place on the web and within their organizations and involve them much sooner. So I do think that we'll see this carry out more. I don't think it'll be something that it's going to be a matter of kicking and screaming, but it's just another moment in this time where we're thinking about where transparency matters.
Mm-hmm. And probably a broadening of the topics even to address. Mary Lee, you had something to add.
Adding that, a lot of this is coming from the inside out.
Yep.
Organizations' own employees are pressuring their leadership teams to take action, to be transparent in what they're doing around this issue. And so I think that is helping drive the conversation as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Mm-hmm. Actually, great segue to the, internal world of companies, that is, another driver. We actually have a poll question related to, which we can put up now, relating to communications and employees. And the question is, how has the internal perception of marketing and communication changed in organizations since the start of COVID-19? Is there greater recognition than pre-pandemic, about the same recognition, or lower recognition than pre-pandemic? So let's Let's see what our audience thinks. Let's give it a couple of more seconds. Okay, let's close the poll. We have a pretty clear result. So most of our audience thinks, almost 2/3, that there is greater recognition than pre-pandemic for marketing and communications, which I guess is great news for the profession. And only 6% think that it's lower. Any reactions to that from your points of view? How the role of CMOs might have been elevated also through this. I imagine there has been more collaboration with the CEO and a range of other C-suite colleagues throughout this crisis. Any thoughts on for the CMO profession on their standing?
I have to say this doesn't really surprise me much, because when you think about what's most visible and how the companies have reacted to the pandemic, it has come from the marketing side of the house. When you think about what's out there in the external world, so I don't find that terribly surprising.
Right. I think you have two things going on here. One, companies' employees are demanding more transparency, more information, and they're wanting to know. But they're also at the same time wanting to see their companies out there sharing what they're saying internally, sharing it externally. So you have a lot of companies now that are posting their policies on their websites, materials that they used to be only in-house, only private for employees. And a lot of them are saying this is a way of demonstrating the trust-building work that they're doing, right, to build and deepen the relationships with their employees on one hand, and the other is that, the employees themselves want to know that they're working for a company that's making a difference, that their companies are speaking out and taking action and representing the values that they have.
It sounds like really good news for the profession, right? Like it sounds like an elevation of the importance and recognition internally, which probably is good news. Stacey, any thoughts on this?
I completely agree with what both Mary Lee and Craig have said, and the findings from this poll don't surprise me at all, because I do think unequivocally, certainly I talk to peer CMOs with some frequency, including with the conference board, and I think that is absolutely consistent with what we're seeing everywhere on the greater recognition.
Right. Actually, we have a couple of audience questions that are relating to another topic we talked about earlier, which is one is by Jolene Fuentes, and she asked, are there companies that can or should be modeled after for companies that are going from in-office work to telecommuting long-term? Can you think of any examples of companies that have been managing this really well? Of course, there have been announcements by Twitter and other tech companies that have said, we go remote now indefinitely. Have you heard of any good examples where this has worked out really well?
It's too early to call. I mean, we do know, we have heard of organizations that have either indefinitely or like to the second half of next year. I think it's too early for us to call whether that's a success or not. But it is interesting to watch to see what people are doing, and I think most people are landing on hybrid type solutions.
Right. Well, we'll observe, and let's hope we'll have some good examples, for any type of strategy. The more remote, the mixed one, the more in person. Let's just see how it goes. So we can take the poll down and move on to the next topic, which is about sustainability and corporate purpose. So here we see that CMOs apparently are less optimistic than other colleagues in the C-suite about sustainability topics. Like if you look at the bottom two items there, consumers will be willing to pay more for locally produced brands. The share is a little lower for CMOs than for most other functions in the C-suite. And also efforts to mitigate climate change will accelerate. They're also not as positive. They might be, thinking of, they have to earn money and they can't spend as much on programs such as sustainability, which might look like luxury. But, what do you think? Are CMOs too pessimistic, or are they simply realistic?
Well, I think in general, CMOs are are a pessimistic lot by trade, simply because we're always scrutinizing all of the things that go on and say, how do we make this credible? How do we make this credible? So I think our radar on those things are higher. This one is an interesting one for me because I will say, based on where I sit in the world, meaning B2B, professional services, distributed throughout many countries, I am more optimistic, I think, than I've ever been on a lot of these things. I do think there was a very initial moment of shock, a little bit of duck and cover, a little bit of saying, how do you just make sure we get all of our own ducks in a row here within an organization? I think that very quickly pivoted to having, well, first for us, it was having client impact at scale, no matter what we had to do, we were there to help our clients get through their moments in time, where their moments of truth. And then I saw that very quickly pivot to saying, yep, we are going to continue to help our clients at all costs, get them where they need to be, but that is not enough. We must make sure we are helping the communities that we live and work in, and again, the professionals, the people around us who need our help. And that is not, I'll be super honest, right? That was not somebody sitting in corporate deciding that was the marketing pillar. That was our people. Those are our thousands of people that got up every day and donated their extra hours of waking time to make sure that we were covering, call center, COVID emergency capacity, right? So for me, while there was a period of time where for survival, you could only deal with so much, I saw our people live our purpose at rates that were astonishing, astounding, how core that was to what we got up and did every day. And then the desire to make sure we continue to make an impact with sustainability and things like that. I think the risk here is burnout, right? There's a huge desire to do and to make an impact and to make the world better than we found it. And by the way, pick any topic right now and there's lots we can do to make it better. So I think the desire is stronger than it's ever been. I think we've got to help create enough focus to help people actually be able to live up to that desire and make an impact, because I see a high risk of burnout in any direction I look right now in the world.
So interesting that you're talking again about the employee perspective, that they really want to genuinely do the right thing on sustainability. And there might also be, it would be interesting to hear from you, but is there more interest also from a customer perspective in these topics? Even if they, at the moment, they cannot pay maybe for any premium that is associated with sustainable brands and
I think that's the part where
products
we
and
need
services.
to, re-engage our on the survey side with customers, because we've been saying now for 15 years on the research side for both reputation research, marketing, and corporate social responsibility research, that companies are able to charge a premium price, right, when they've got a great reputation or when they're involved in some type of societal impact that matters to their employees and to their consumer base. I think what we're going to find now is that it's going to be less that they're able to charge a premium price and more a matter of that, because so many more people expect it, that they're going to be less willing to pay a premium price because they expect it as part of table stakes, right? If you're going to be around today, it's what you have to do. That's what we're expecting. So not that you're going to charge a premium price, but that you're going to be allowed to exist, and we're going to be your employee, or we're going to be your customer. Not that we're going to be willing to pay a higher price, but this is the new world that we live in.
Interesting. So really expected now, which goes to the point that now the ball is even more in companies' court. However, given they have to be financially prudent, obviously. So they have to be even more creative to make sustainability happen with all these constraints, but also expectations on the customer side. That's a really tricky and challenging position, but maybe it will force a lot of innovation. Mary Lee, you wanted to chime in.
Created the perfect storm for this. When the pandemic hit, there was a certain amount of retrenching, which I think Stacy was referring to. Then I think there was a heightened concern and awareness of the environment being so precious, and that has been exacerbated by the number of hurricanes that we've had, by the fires in the western U.S., all the things that we know about, but it's been really prevalent this year on top of everything else that we have going on. And so I think that organizations are starting to worry a little bit more, and I think that really comes to the desk of the marketer and the communicator to really think about how the organization is behaving responsibly given the set of circumstances that we're being given, being dealt. And I just know from the work that I do with the Council of CMOs with the Conference Board that all of our members are increasingly interested in talking about ESG goals and thinking about what their organization should be doing in this space. So I think it's a heightened awareness, definitely.
Mm-hmm. It seems like both on the company and the customer side. So let's see how that's going to play out for going forward. And let's just move on to one other topic on this webcast, which is the topic of digital and digital transformation, digital lifestyles, and so forth. So here we see CMO's views of that. And if you look at the top, speed up the pace of transformation into a digitally driven organization, the share for CMOs is actually lower than for other C-suite executives. The same is true for becoming more data-driven, but it is higher on providing more self-service options. So it seems on digital transformation and data, CMOs think differently in the sense of that they don't see this as much, maybe because they are more advanced than other functions. And on the other hand, what they really see as the legacy coming out of COVID-19 is providing more self-service options. What do you think about, especially about this point about self-service options? Is that driven by customer demand, or is it more a cost decision to make things more efficient and save cost? Anybody wants to go?
Well, I'll start off because everybody's being really quiet. I think it's both. I think that marketers and communicators want to give the audiences what they're looking for. So, obviously tailoring things, personalization is becoming more important. Of course, there's the yin and yang of personalization versus privacy. And so, I think marketers have their eye on that balance at the moment, and watching what's been happening in Europe and thinking about what's going on in California, how does that affect the world? But then I think also this is driven by, obviously, agility and being able to react more quickly and more cost effectively as well.
Yeah, I don't think you have to do a survey on this one, right? I don't think you need to survey your customers to find out if they want more self-service. I think you had to move much faster than that, and just realize, just with so much of the policies and regulations that are coming down, that if you're not going to be able to respond and offer self-service, you're not going to have a customer much longer, right? So just basic survival says that you got to innovate and think about how you're going to meet the needs of your consumers at this point.
I was specifically thinking of this actually when you thought of all the wait lines, waiting in line during the pandemic when everybody was overwhelmed, where self-service options probably are, much needed. Stacy, you were going to chime in.
I think what both Mary Lee and Craig have said is spot on. And I would say, just interestingly for the B2B environment, and the B2B environment that I'm in is typically very long cycle. So I think when you look at the more self-service options here, I think this is a great area where B2B can look to B2C and continue to follow what B2C uncovers as best practices. Because again, just because we are all business decision makers in our day job, we are also consumers at every other moment, right? I'm on a Target app doing my shopping probably 5 minutes after I was just making a very important business decision, right? And so I do think the lessons in the consumer-driven behaviors and create lessons for B2B to really be able to pick and choose the best. Not everything is going to work, but if you just take self-service as an example, it used to be an environment where long cycle B2B, you wouldn't think about self-service. Now, when you think about long cycle B2B, you think about where in those critical moments do you want to enable people to help themselves at that period in their journey versus when do they actually need to interact with the person.
So really the B2C space as inspiration for B2B for, being inventive.
There's a lot here as well. So.
Great. All right. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour. And so let me close it by, asking you all a question about the future for marketers and communicators. If you look ahead, what should be marketers' biggest priority in the next 6 to 12 months? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in because I think I instinctively think that it's taking the best of both worlds. It's taking what we've learned out of having lived through the pandemic experience and bringing those new things to, whether they be tools or process or methodologies, whatever they are, and letting that augment what we already knew worked in the old world. So just trying to make the best of everything.
I would add to that momentum, right? That there's a lot of things that we learned that we can do that we never thought were possible. Now we know it's possible, and how can we keep the momentum going while at the same time, right, recognizing people need a rest, right? They need a break. They're burned out, overworked, and finding some way to keep the momentum while still allowing people to renew themselves.
Yeah, I think those two are fantastic, and so not to retread those two, I will add a third complementary to that. I think it's focus, right? Because the point we're all making, this has been a time of massive innovation. It's been a time of unprecedented speed in iteration of what we're bringing to market and what we're offering to clients and what we're doing for our employees and other customer, audience bases. So I do think when I look at my role and what I get up every day right now doing is how do I help drive focus to make sure that we're not doing everything. It's virtually impossible for us to do everything. So how do we ensure we are creating enough focus to do the right thing and let some of the nice to haves or those other things go undone and be okay with that?
Actually, the theme we had before, deliberate, it weaved itself through all of your answers, I think, being deliberate about many different aspects of your work. So thank you so much to our speakers for sharing your thoughts and insights on this fascinating topic about the future of marketing and communications and the outcomes of COVID-19. Thank you also to our audience for joining us today. And last but not least, thank you to our digital media team who has been working their magic behind the scenes to make this all happen. And before we close, let me just point out some resources that we have at the conference board. This content will actually be published as a report in the next few weeks. There are some other resources showing on the slide. We have a series of webcasts coming up, some related to COVID-19, others just general business topics looking ahead on various topics such as sustainability. We also have a webcast coming up on AI-driven digital experiences. And we also have a content hub around any research we do at the conference board on COVID-19. And at the Marketing and Communications Center, we have a series of podcasts in our influencers series. So we hope to see you again on one of these future programs. And again, thank you everybody for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.